swear that I wasn't even thinking about the pain. There's this weird potpourri. All my forearm hairs burned off from here to there.
At 58, Mick Foley no longer dresses his stories in polite wrestling language. He speaks with the honesty of a man who paid for every milestone in blood, and he is finally willing to admit something he never said on camera. There were wrestlers he truly hated. Not in a playful storyline sense, not in a manufactured rivalry, but in the real feeling that hit him the moment someone smashed a chair into his skull without control or pushed him into a spot designed to break him. In Foley's world, hate was born from pain, danger, disrespect, and the fear that a single mistake could end everything. It was the emotion that lived inside Cactus Jack, when the violence went too far inside mankind, when the mask filled with sweat and blood inside Dude Love, when the smile could no longer hide the truth. Foley survived rings that should have ended him, and opponents who treated his body like a weapon to be used. Through all the chaos, 5 men stood out as the ones who pushed him past every limit he had. 5 men he did not just dislike. 5 men he genuinely hated. These are the 5 wrestlers Mick Foley hated the most. Number 5. Randy Orton represented a kind of danger Mick Foley had not encountered in years. It was not the danger of sheer physical power like Vader, nor the strategic brutality of Triple H. It was the danger of a young, confident, unapologetic performer who believed he was destined to rise and saw every veteran in his way as nothing more than an obstacle to be removed. Foley had heard the stories about Orton's attitude, the arrogance of the legend killer persona, the way he carried himself backstage with a calm that sometimes felt like disrespect. But nothing prepared him for the moment he stood in the ring with Orton and realized the young star had no intention of holding anything back. Orton did not just want to beat Mick Foley. He wanted to make an example out of him in front of the world. Their rivalry peaked at Backlash 2004, a match that became one of the defining moments of both men's careers. Foley walked in, knowing Orton was hungry. What he did not know was how far Orton was willing to go to prove he belonged in the same conversation as the greats. The match unfolded with a level of intensity that Foley felt in every bone. When Orton poured out the thumbtacks and the silver points scattered across the canvas, Foley felt a cold weight settle in his chest. Thumbtacks were not props. They were reminders of the kind of matches that had already shortened Foley's career. But the look in Orton's eyes told him the young man was not intimidated by the danger. He was inspired by it. The moment Foley's back crashed into the bed of tacks, he felt a shock that shot through every nerve in his body. Hundreds of sharp points pierced his skin, locking themselves into his flesh as he writhed in pain. The crowd gasped, but Orton did not hesitate. He moved with the confidence of a man who knew the match was his for the taking. Then came the RKO on the tacks, a moment so violent and so reckless that even Foley, a man who built his reputation on enduring the impossible, struggled to comprehend the sheer brutality of it. The sound of the impact, the sting of the metal, and the taste of blood in his mouth made Foley question whether Orton understood the line he had just crossed. Backstage after the match, Foley watched Orton walk with the swagger of a rising star who had just carved his legacy into history. Foley was in agony, but he understood something important. Orton had not been careless. He had been deliberate. Every move he made that night was designed to send a message to the audience, to the locker room, and to Foley himself. Orton was not simply trying to hurt him. He was trying to evolve by using Foley's pain as a catalyst. With time, Foley recognized Orton's talent and respected the way he transformed into one of the greatest wrestlers of his generation. But none of that changes what he felt in the heat of their feud. Randy Orton stands at number 5, because he forced Mick Foley to confront the harsh reality of what the next era of WWE would look like. A world where youth, ambition, and fearlessness rewrote the rules of brutality, and Foley found himself standing directly in its path. Number 4. Edge entered Mick Foley's life at a moment when Foley believed he had already survived the worst that professional wrestling could inflict. Foley had wrestled inside steel cages, fallen from cells, crashed through tables, bled on concrete floors, and endured levels of punishment that pushed him to the edge of human endurance. But nothing prepared him for the kind of ambition Edge carried into their feud in 2006. Edge was young, explosive, obsessed with defining himself, and willing to risk everything to create a moment that would carve his name into the history of the business. Foley recognized that hunger immediately, and he understood the danger of stepping into the ring with someone who viewed pain not as a warning sign but as a weapon. Edge did not simply want to beat Mick Foley. He wanted to transform himself by going through him. During the WrestleMania 22 build-up, Foley sensed a shift in the air. Edge approached every segment, every promo, every idea with a spark that bordered on reckless enthusiasm. He talked about violence the way other wrestlers talked about opportunity. He wanted barbed wire. He wanted thumbtacks. He wanted fire. Foley had lived through all of those things. He knew what scars they left and how long the pain stayed. Edge only saw the spectacle. He saw the headlines. He saw the chance to rise from star to legend in one defining night. Foley tried to match Edge's energy on camera, but inside, he felt a familiar weight press against his ribs. He knew this match would hurt in ways he had not felt in years. When the bell rang in Chicago, Edge came at him with a level of intensity Foley had not seen since his wars with Vader and Triple H. Every strike carried purpose. Every bump carried risk. Edge fought with urgency, as if every second of the match mattered to his future. The barbed wire bat tore into Foley's flesh, ripping across his skin with a sting that shot straight into his spine. Thumbtacks embedded themselves into his arms and back as the match spiraled deeper into chaos. Edge's eyes burned with adrenaline. He was chasing something bigger than a victory. He was chasing a moment that would define both of them. The flaming table spot became that moment. Foley had taken fire before, but the impact of Edge spearing him through the burning wood felt like a violent collision between past and future. The heat engulfed them, the flames roared, and Foley felt every nerve in his body scream. It was a moment so extreme that even Foley, a man who built his reputation on surviving the impossible, was stunned by how far Edge was willing to go. When they crashed to the floor, Foley understood the truth. Edge had not just survived the fire. He had been reborn by it. Backstage after the match, Foley lay on a trainer's table with burns across his arm and pain radiating through every muscle. Edge walked in with the look of a man who knew his career had just changed forever. Foley felt pride for helping elevate him, but beneath the pride lived something harsher. Edge had forced him to revisit a version of himself he thought he had left behind. Edge had pushed him back into the fire literally and metaphorically, and Foley carried the aftermath in scars and memories. That is why Edge stands at number 4. He was ambitious, brilliant, and fearless, but he was also the man who dragged Mick Foley into one of the most brutal nights of his life. Number 3. Triple H was not just another opponent for Mick Foley. He was the man who turned violence into strategy and ambition into impact. From the moment their rivalry ignited in late 1999, Foley understood he was dealing with someone who fought with a level of calculation he had rarely faced before. Triple H did not rely on chaos. He relied on control. He struck with purpose, paced matches with discipline, and pushed Foley into situations designed to maximize both drama and damage. Foley respected that approach, but inside the respect lived a harder truth. During their most intense battles, Triple H made Foley feel something few opponents had ever triggered. He made Foley feel like he was being dismantled piece by piece, not for the crowd, not for the story, but because Triple H needed to prove he was ready to carry WWE on his back. Their street fight at the 2000 Royal Rumble became the first real confirmation of that belief. Foley walked in, expecting brutality. What he didn't expect was the icy precision behind every move Triple H executed. Every chair shot landed with unmistakable intent. Every fall Foley took onto wooden pallets felt like the work of a man determined to test how much punishment another human being could absorb without breaking. Triple H did not rush. He punished Foley slowly, carefully, almost clinically, as if he were dissecting him. Foley had endured countless violent matches in his career, but this one felt different. This one felt personal in a way he couldn't fully explain at the time. The punishment escalated in Hell in a Cell a month later. Few matches in Foley's career forced him to face the limits of his body the way that cage did. Triple H used the environment as a weapon, slamming Foley into steel mesh until his muscles jolted with pain. When Foley climbed to the top of the cell, he knew what was coming next, but the fall still knocked the air out of him and left him staring up at the lights with the realization that Triple H was not holding back out of respect for his Legacy. Triple H was chasing the defining moment of his own career, and Foley was the obstacle standing in his path. That truth stung almost as much as the blows. Backstage, Foley could feel the rising aura around Triple H. The younger performer was stepping into his prime, gaining confidence, gaining power, and gaining the company's trust. Foley felt the weight of what he had just endured. Triple H needed him not to compete, but to survive long enough to elevate him. And Foley did exactly that. He took the damage, took the falls, took the brutality, and walked forward even when his body begged him not to. In those moments he realized he wasn't just fighting an opponent. He was fighting a man who was building his legacy, brick by brick, using Foley's pain as the mortar. Over time, Foley grew to respect the greatness Triple H built. But respect does not erase memory. During their fiercest battles, Triple H pushed Foley beyond what he believed he could endure. He forced Foley to confront the harsh reality that even legends must break for new stars to rise. And that is why Triple H stands at number 3. Few men ever demanded so much from Mick Foley, and even fewer had the power to deliver it so ruthlessly. Number 2. Vader. Before Mick Foley ever made his name in WWE, he stepped into rings where the danger was not theatrical, and the violence was not carefully negotiated. And no opponent embodied that reality more than Vader. Number 17 stills. Foley had faced tough men, stiff workers, and unpredictable brawlers, but Vader operated on another level entirely. He was a storm trapped inside human skin, a heavyweight who moved with terrifying speed, and carried the kind of real-world power that erased the line between performance and survival. The first time Foley squared up against him in WCW, he felt a surge of adrenaline that came not from excitement but from instinctive fear. Vader did not hit to entertain. He hit to dominate. Foley understood immediately that he was dealing with a man who viewed pain as part of the conversation. Their rivalry became legendary for a reason. Vader's punches were not the kind you rolled with. They were explosions that rattled your skull and forced your jaw sideways. Every time Vader's glove connected with Foley's cheekbone, Foley felt a flash of light behind his eyes. Matches were supposed to be controlled, but there was nothing controlled about the way Vader imposed himself. Foley tasted blood in nearly every exchange, felt his ribs ache under every blow, and wondered more than once if Vader realized how close some of those strikes were to causing permanent damage. Yet Vader kept pushing, kept hitting, kept forcing Foley to stand in front of a man who seemed built for destruction. One night in 1993 defined everything Foley remembers about that rivalry. Vader powerbombed him straight onto the concrete floor, an impact so violent that Foley's spine felt like it had been split in 3. For a brief moment, he could not breathe, could not move, and could not understand how he was still conscious. The wrestling world often celebrates unbelievable bumps, but that moment was not something to celebrate. It was a moment where Foley genuinely wondered whether his career had just ended. Vader did not hesitate. He did not look apologetic. He believed in a philosophy where pain made matches real, and Foley was the man absorbing the cost of that philosophy. Backstage tension made everything feel even heavier. Vader exuded intimidation without saying a word. Foley remembers watching him tape his fists with the calm of someone who had already accepted the violence he was about to deliver. Foley tried to mask his anxiety, telling himself he could handle anything the business demanded. But Vader forced him to confront a deeper truth. Some opponents were not just performers. They were forces of nature, and surviving them required more than toughness. It required a willingness to let parts of yourself break. Years later, Foley would speak highly of Vader's ability, his legacy, and the respect they eventually built. But that respect was earned through blood bruises and doubt. In the heart of their rivalry, Foley never forgot the nights he left the arena barely able to stand, head-spinning, ribs throbbing, grateful simply to be able to walk out at all. Vader shaped Foley not through rivalry but through raw, unforgiving impact. And that is why he stands at number 2. Few men pushed Foley closer to the edge of his physical limits, and no one made him confront the reality of pain the way Vader did. Number 1. The Rock. There is only one man, Mick Foley admits, pushed him past every physical and emotional limit he had, and that man is The Rock. Not the Hollywood icon he would later become, but the relentless, hungry, fiercely ambitious competitor who stood across from Foley in 1999 with a steel chair in his hands and something to prove. Foley had endured violence throughout his entire career, but nothing prepared him for the sheer intensity of the I Quit match at the Royal Rumble. It was a night permanently burned into his memory, not because of storyline drama, but because of how real the danger became. Foley expected pain. He expected chaos, but he never expected the man he trusted in the ring to swing a chair with that kind of force, commitment, and frequency. The moment Foley's hands were tied behind his back, he understood that this match would not be a performance. It would be a test. I have a problem. The first chair shot exploded against his skull and sent a shockwave through his entire body. The second shot made his vision blur. By the time the fifth shot cracked against his head, Foley realized he was no longer thinking about storytelling or spots. He was fighting to remain conscious. The Rock kept swinging. Shot after shot. 11 unprotected blows to the skull. The crowd roared, unaware of the severity of what was unfolding. Foley's children were in the front row, watching their father absorb a beating that should never have continued. That image stayed with him for years, and the noise of those chair shots echoed in his memory long after the match ended. Backstage, Foley struggled to process what had happened. His head throbbed, his face was swollen, and blood still dripped from the cuts left by the steel. The Rock, still full of adrenaline, approached him with excitement, unaware of the full extent of the damage. Foley wanted to believe it was just youthful ambition, the hunger of a man trying to cement himself as the top star of a new era. But part of him also felt something heavier. He felt betrayed. He had trusted Rock to protect him, to take care of him in the ring, the way professionals are supposed to. Instead, the moment ran out of control, fueled by intensity and spectacle, and Foley ended up paying the price with his body. Over time, Foley understood what drove Rock that night. The Rock was ascending at an incredible pace, and that match became one of the defining moments of his career. The brutality, the spectacle, the raw emotion, all of it helped shape The Rock into the global superstar he would become. And eventually, Foley forgave him. Not because the pain faded, but because wrestling is built on moments that push the boundaries of what performers can endure. The Rock pushed those boundaries in ways few others ever have. But nothing erases the truth of what Mick Foley felt in that ring. The Rock pushed him to places he never intended to go physically and mentally, and forced him to confront the reality of how far wrestling could be taken in the pursuit of greatness. That is why, above every rival he ever had, The Rock stands at the very top of this list. When Mick Foley looks back on these 5 men, he does not hide from the truth. Each one represents a chapter of his career, defined by pain, risk, and the kind of raw emotion most wrestlers never admit out loud. Randy Orton pushed him toward the edge of his physical limits. Edge dragged him through fire in pursuit of legacy. Triple H forced him to endure calculated brutality in the name of greatness. Vader tested every instinct he had, just to stay alive in the ring. And The Rock, at the height of their rivalry, made him feel a level of ghét, born from the kind of violence that leaves scars far deeper than the ones you can see. Foley understands now that hatred in wrestling is complicated. It is built from fear, respect, adrenaline, and the knowledge that your body is the currency everyone spends to tell a story. These 5 men shaped him through punishment, and each one left a mark that time could never erase. But hatred does not invalidate legacy. It clarifies it. Foley survived them all, and in doing so, carved his place as one of wrestling's ultimate warriors. The question now is simple. Which rivalry do you think defined him the most?